Good morning. Um, running a little late this morning. A lot of times, what I do, excuse me, is pre-record and then set the video to upload early Monday morning. But I want to keep our continuous podcast discussion going. I think it's extremely valuable. And I know that it helps a lot of people because I get some comments. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, not just our podcast comments, but we're going to talk about different video comments off some of our top videos here on the channel. We have been doing YouTube for probably 9 to 10 months pretty seriously. I've had a YouTube channel for quite a while. And I want to share kind of what's going on as a professional technician in the industry, as a 2+ decades automotive experience that I see time and time again. And so that's really why we started our podcast or our YouTube channel. And I want to share some of the things. And over the last few weeks and months, I have seen a lot of either DIY work that didn't go well or even other shops that didn't necessarily go well. And there's a lot of comments. So I'm going to be using my phone quite a bit here. So forgive me if that, seems, maybe a little unprofessional, but it really helps me kind of run through a lot of the comments. I'm also going to talk about a lot of our top content because we have quite a bit going on here on the channel. So some of our more recent videos, I had a situation where a vehicle had been in and had tires done somewhere else. And inside the tire or rim itself, on most vehicles from anywhere about 2012 on up, it's actually mandated that you have a tire pressure monitor system. And I see a lot of shops out there for some reason not really grasp how that system works. I won't say it's simple, but it's simpler than a lot of techs or shops make it. And so having the right equipment and the right training is key for everything, but really just doing the job and having good communication and good understanding about the system. So that one's top of mind with some of the comments that I've gotten is, how does the system work? And, why particularly did that other shop just eliminate the sensors altogether? Because that's what I ended up finding out. Instead of actually fixing the tire pressure issue, they put regular old style valve stems on it. Now, when you do that, it eliminates the sensor that's inside the tire. And depending on the vehicle, those are anywhere from about $80 to $100 each. So you could spend $400 pretty quick. And more than likely, the sensors that were in it probably would still have been good if they didn't get broken during disassembly, because that does happen. You have a rim, if you will, and then you have a big foot, air-operated foot that breaks the bead on the tire itself. And if you don't pay attention, as that bead breaker comes in, it will break or shear the sensor off, and that happens a lot. So here we have trained our staff so they know kind of where to position that. It's just something you need to be mindful of. It's not really a big deal. And if we do break one, typically, excuse me, we step up and man, the old voice just ain't working today. There we go. We step up and take care of whatever that issue is. So if we break it, it's on us. Typically, we just replace it and move on about our day. If we, you also have a tool that will basically energize the sensor or send out a signal and get the frequency response back. And I can tell temperature, I can tell battery life, I can tell the part number or the identification number, and the health of that sensor before we ever break down the tire. So that typically is the best practices. You should be checking those before you start and before you bust those tires down, so you can have that discussion. If we have a weak or failing sensor or set of sensors, depending on age, usually 6 to 10 years in reason is what I see out of those sensors. So then we'll make a recommendation. That way there's no surprises for that customer. So there was quite a few questions about that. I actually had some folks that know me personally that had messaged in and said, hey, kind of this is what's going on. Now, you might think that, we went, you know, 50, 60 years without tire pressure sensors, and that was fine. Excuse me. But what I've noticed is a lot of people don't check their tires. And without the tire pressure monitoring system, they would run them flat and then they would damage a perfectly good tire. So if you have the system and either it looks like a low tire light, it's kind of looks like a horseshoe, I guess the best way I could describe it. Typically it's an amber color or a yellowish orange color. That system's fairly reasonable to do repairs on and keep working. I strongly recommend getting it fixed. I know a lot of people drive around with the light on, but it will save you in the long run from having a damaged tire. And right now in 2025, tires are not cheap, and cheap tires are not always good. So you need to get as many good miles out of the tires that you can get to where you're not throwing good money after bad. And having a good operational tire pressure monitor system is, in my opinion, well worth it. So if there's any more questions about that, definitely let me know. I've talked 6 minutes about that. So I want to scroll over here to YouTube allows me to show like the last 28 days what our top video is. And a lot of our top video has been air conditioning work. We did a comparison between a Snap-on refrigerant identifier and an Icon refrigerant identifier. And I have gotten so many comments on that particular video. There's probably hundreds of comments on there. And I know we're still a small channel, but that's quite a few comments. And there's people that think Snap-on is the devil. There's people that think Icon is trash. There's people that think refrigerant identifiers are complete garbage. And so I want to spend a little time talking about that because clearly a lot of you out there are passionate about that. And I'd be interested to see what comments are generated off this video. But so I have been doing air conditioning work for over 20 years. I have figured out what works for me, what doesn't work for me, but we went through a big transition about probably getting close to 10 years ago now, where they're phasing out 134A and they're going with a new refrigerant 1234YF. Now, previous to that, I have bought a bunch of sniffers or refrigerant identifiers over the years, and they have been absolute trash. I was so anti-refrigerant identifier that I wouldn't give you a grain of salt for one. And so I always use dye throughout the system. I have a special soap blend that's actually made for, showing a gas leak. And so I've had great success, depending on the size of the leak, either charging the system and soaping it or charging the system and put dye in it. And that's what a lot of these comments, kind of went to. Dye was the only option. Dye was the only option. And really, had we stayed with 134A refrigerant, I would have been right there with you. I never would have entertained spending $800 on a Snap-on identifier, or I think $170 on an Icon. And really, I did that just to get a comparison. That video that's on here, and it's basically Snap-on AC sniffer versus Icon sniffer. I did that just to see whether it was worth anything or not. And it ended up being very similar. Cost-wise, significantly different. And I don't know longevity on the Icon yet. But they did a very good job. And what really pushed me into the identifier is at A1 Custom here, we deal with a lot of, vehicles that are 10, 20, 30 years old. But we have a lot of people that are just out of warranty from the dealer that we start servicing their vehicle immediately. A lot of our folks, they go to the dealer for warranty work, but the moment that they're out of warranty, we see their vehicle. So we're working on, 2020, 22, 23s, right in there. And almost all of those systems from the manufacturer come with this 1234YF. And I'd have to look at the split on it today, but it's probably, I don't know if it's 8 to 10 times more expensive than R134A, but it's significant. And so that's really what pushed me on the identifier side of things. Was I wanted to, well, I didn't really have the ability to charge with a inexpensive refrigerant with dye and just let it basically leak out, carry the refrigerant dye to the leak, and then I could see it with a UV light. That's how I've done it and been very successful at it for most of my career. The 1234YF expense does not allow me to do that. If I lose a pound of that, I've lost several $100s more than likely. And again, I haven't priced it today, so I don't know what it's getting. And so whether I use that and eat that at my expense, or I use that as part of the test and the customer covers the cost of it, it's not practical. And so a lot of the comments that I got were like, dye only, dye only, dye only. And I'm like, all right, I get it, but what are you doing not to just waste that money? That's not, in my mind, a feasible option anymore due to the expense or the change of refrigerant. And so that's really where I started diving in about 2018 into some of the identifiers. And then I realized that if I spent a little bit more money, I got one that I could have a little bit more faith in. Now, I have worked with 2 technicians, and there were several comments on that to buy a Yokogawa. And I may have butchered that, but basically that is a commercial HVAC guy style sniffer. Those are amazing. I don't know that that company is in business anymore. If they are, please let me know and I'll probably order one. But I still have one technician that works with me now, and that's what he uses, and they are phenomenal. Absolutely wonderful pieces of equipment. So if I have that option, I would gladly pay the money to be more accurate for my customers on air conditioning work, because when it's hot outside, ain't nobody got time to be sweating to death as you're going to work or going home, going to meeting, etc., that your AC isn't keeping you comfortable so you can perform well at whatever it is. Maybe it's church, maybe it's the doctor. Fill in the blank with what's important to you. So as we go through that and the evolution of that, I landed on a Snap-on, and that's served me very well. One other reason that I have been burned with dye, and I think it's worth talking about, is if it's leaking inside the dash. And you guys had a great amount of comments there. In the video, I was running the vehicle with the air, the blower motor running, air on high, and I was able to pick it up at the drain and coming out of the vents. You guys had some good comments. Really, that side and the pressure while it's running is quite a bit less than just the static pressure when the system equalizes, depending on ambient temperature, as well as sniffing it at the vent is a more effective place, because typically that refrigerant will settle. Which I've done both ways. You guys did a great job pointing it out in the comments, and I appreciate that. The fact that I was trying to stress the system, or the sniffers, if you will, and it was able to pick it up in the stream, tells me that those sniffers are pretty good. And if you're a person out there that's never run one of those, the biggest complaint that I've ever had with it is you get a lot of false positives. For instance, I was in my test facility, and I had used some brake clean in the shop not terribly long before I started using the AC, the refrigerant identifier. And the whole shop was now false positive. And so I ended up having to air it out, wait several hours, and then I could go back to testing and seeing what's going on. So depending on what's in the air will absolutely skew your readings. And so you have to be mindful of that. You have to understand kind of how it works, as well as during the evaporation process, or the state of change from, pardon me, from a liquid to a vapor. That's really how the air conditioning system kind of works, whether it condenses out under the hood and it goes from a vapor to a liquid, or it evaporates inside the dash. That state of change is what makes the magic of the air conditioning actually work. So I've had situations, and it's always been Chrysler for some reason, where if the leak is low on the evaporator, I will see dye out of the refrigerant drain. But if the leak seems to be high, it has a hard time carrying enough dye to the top side of the evaporator and then let it run down and out the drain. And there was a ton of comments on that. So if it's a leak in the dash, it's always going to be in the drain. Maybe it has for you. Your mileage may vary. I don't have that luxury to continue guessing for the customers that I deal with. We have 5 locations. I run between all 5, and I deal with the oddball, weird, complex items on vehicles. And so I can think of several Jeep Cherokees, the classic style. I can think of actually an F-150 and an F-250 we've had this year that did not have any dye. And when we pulled it apart, it was evident on the evaporator, but it was none coming out of the drain. And so, at least for my mileage, that's not an effective enough way to diagnose it. So we're looking at other options. You can't really soap inside the dash. That's not going to work. A lot of the recommendations were to run a borescope in there with a UV light, which they do make, and I have done, and I do have one. My mileage, you can't see the whole evaporator. If it's in the neighborhood or on the side of the evaporator, you can see, and every dash is created differently. I've not had great success or a high success rate finding leaks in that manner. And I'm not opposed to any of these options. I will throw every option that I can at a vehicle in order to get it diagnosed correctly. And that's been moderately successful. Will I try and continue to try it? And if it gives me, the information I need, great. But I'm not going to bank on that being my only option. And a lot of these evaporators, they're built now to where they're not even serviceable. You put a whole HVAC box, which comes with a new heater core, which I recommend anyway, new doors and new actuators across the board, that I want and need absolute information, and that's something that has worked out well for me. So I'm going to go with the sniffers, and I believe in them at this point. I'd love to know what you guys are doing out there. If you're in HVAC, even residential or commercial, but if you're in the trades like I am, and then you're feeling on dye. And my biggest question right now, if you've made it this far in the video, is what are you guys doing, or if you guys are doing service for 1234YF? The expense of it is significantly higher. The time that the machine takes to cycle, to evacuate, vacuum, and refill, it's probably 3 to 4 times longer than the the R134A, which is what I've used most of my career. When I first got in the industry, we still had R12. And so that was being retrofitted and switched to 134A. Or, basically the old style was being adapted to the new refrigerant. And we've had this new refrigerant for me for 30 years. I did and was still able to do some R12 charging, but the expense got really crazy high. And we're kind of seeing that again. So I've been through this before, and now instead of the 134A being expensive, the 1234YF is quite expensive. And really, I say that 134A right now is 3 times higher than what it was 6 years ago. It was at the lowest I've ever seen it for 134A 6-7 years ago. And now a lot of companies are phasing it out, so they're not making it anymore. And we are going to have to be retrofitting the 134A cars at some point. We're not there yet as of 2025, mid-2025. We're going to have to be retrofitting them to the 1234YF, which is really the most expensive refrigerant that I deal with in my line of work. I know there's some 410As and some other commercial refrigerants that I don't necessarily deal with, but a lot of them out there that I see. and the cost doesn't allow me to just charge it and throw dye at it. So whatever you guys are doing, I'd be interested. What I think we're looking into is some different other options on gases. Now, you cannot contaminate a 134A system with other gases because the machine will know it and it'll lock you out and not allow you to service that system. So you got to be careful on that. But we're looking at some other ways that we can do it with an inert gas and possibly be able to identify some leaks in that way. Bear with me, it's a Ford dealership, but that's what we're looking at. We do, if it's a small leak, I do have a dye and we will charge it with that. But the refrigerant identifier has been by far the best way that I've seen. So I know I've kind of run off at the mouth on refrigerant, but we're coming up on AC season. Here it's probably in the mid 80s and been very rainy, so the humidity has been terribly high. Everybody wants their AC working, even me. I drive and own several older vehicles that I have bought, rebuilt, and repurposed for dump trucks and towing vehicles and snow plows. And I have the AC working on pretty much all of them because I don't want to be hot and nasty, especially like, you know, when there's a lot of dust in the air or things going on. Oh, we've got a couple comments. All right. This is from a great customer, honestly, friend of the channel, big supporter of the channel. One of the questions is the TPMS systems are mandated on newer vehicles now? Question mark. I didn't know that. Yes. So there's been certain things that, and to shift gears backwards to our tire pressure, there has been things throughout my career that the government basically said, you must have this on your vehicle by such and such date. And so one of the first ones that I remember was the ABS system. And that probably, and this is just off memory, and I can look it up and let you guys know, but I would say it's somewhere around 94 to 98. They had to have some kind of an anti-lock brake system. And that has been standard, and about everybody out there watching this live stream knows that that has been part of buying a car. It's, you know, the airbag system, seat belts. And then at one point, like I said, around 2013, maybe 2014, I think President Obama was holding office at that point. They mandated tire pressure monitoring. And I'm going to assume, I don't have any rock hard evidence on this, but I'm going to assume it had something to do with the big recall in the late 90s, early 2000s that Firestone had on the Ford Explorer, where it would blow a tire and they would roll the Explorer. I don't know if anybody out there remembers that, but I was in the industry that was still recalled late 2000 or late 90s, early 2000s. I had a friend that actually worked at a Ford dealership, and he did more warranty tires, I think, during that spell than he probably did the rest of his career. And really, just side note on that, Firestone got a lot of bad rap on that. But basically, the way I understand it is part of your ride comfort is how much PSI is in your tire and the deflection. If you've ever had like a lawnmower or a piece of equipment that had solid tires on it that didn't have air in them, you know, they ride terribly bad, terribly bad. And so part of your ride comfort is the give in that tire. And somebody decided to air down the tires to increase the comfort of that vehicle's ride quality. And they really underinflated the tires. And that's what led to a lot of the failures with that design. Had you been running those probably at 45 or 55, I doubt we would have seen. Now, all that's speculation on my part. I don't think we would have seen near the failure and the rollovers of all those vehicles. And I know there were some fatalities in that, so I take that very, very seriously. So yes, after that, the government got involved. They decided, hey, from the operator's portion of the vehicle, you had to be able to monitor your tires. And so pretty much everybody from that point forward, I drove my 07 F-150 in today, it has one of the very early Ford TPMS or tire pressure monitoring systems on it. I just now had to replace all 4 sensors this last year. So they lasted a very long time. Now, that style sensor has changed, and the replacement ones, typically the batteries inside of them don't last near as long. So appreciate the comments and the support to the channel. I hope you can see it's all backwards. There we go. Our struggle bus hat back there. So big thank you, by the way, for that comment and the support to the channel, and obviously here at A1 Custom Car Care. I'd like to know how Dustin keeps calling the 1234YF 1234 running all together. Yes, that's the new refrigerant that is out there. And so I've just had to, in the automotive field, we have acronyms for everything. And so 1234YF, 1234YF, same. Whatever you want to remember it by, that's how I have finally trained. I've been to more training on different things. This is transmission, this is diesel, and then many trainings on air conditioning. And so the 1234 is how I have just decided that that's what I'm going to call it. We ended up having to buy all new machines as well, so that was a little bit of an expense for us, and they weren't cheap at all. They were about twice as much as what you could get a R134A machine for, and there's some different fittings, some different tooling that goes along with it, and it has been a little bit of a journey for us to make sure that we are not behind the curve. I still know there's a lot of shops out there that do not have machines for servicing that, and so they have to either turn it away or maybe do some things that I don't think are 100% above board, such as charging it with a refrigerant that is not designed. And I have had my identifier pick up on those after they've been somewhere else, and I've had to turn those vehicles away. So don't contaminate your systems. If you have an older system, the 134A, great system, great refrigerant. The 1234YF is more combustible, and there was a lot of testing done, even a lot of, I would say, butting of heads at the manufacturing level. I'm not a big Mercedes fan. They do a few things really well, but some of their later stuff made completely out of plastic, I just don't see the longevity of it. But the culture of a Mercedes company is very safety oriented, very safety oriented. And they really fought hard because they didn't want to put a combustible refrigerant that pumps inside the passenger compartment. So knowing what you're doing around a flammable gas was a big part of our training. So if you're out there kind of goofing with things and you don't really know what's going on and you get something that can ignite it, you absolutely can have a very bad day very fast. And so having a completely oxygen-free environment inside the AC system is critical, and not messing around and playing with gases that shouldn't be interacting. So with all that being said, we're coming up on about a half hour. Those are some of the top comments. I didn't get quite as far through the comments as I wanted, but you guys overall have been amazing. I have gotten a few haters out there, but that hater's going to hate, and that's totally fine. I appreciate the comments here in our live stream. I don't know that the live stream's how I'm going to do it all the time, but I wanted to mix it up, and I didn't want to leave you guys hanging for our podcast. So if you've got questions, thoughts, concerns, our next podcast will be out next week if I don't drop one early. Sometimes I kind of sprinkle one in it throughout the week. I've seen some really big consequences on people not doing their maintenance, and I have several that's going to cost quite a bit to get that rectified. And I'd really love for anybody that views our channel to not be in that boat, and hopefully I can save you guys some money and get you to where you're not stranded out there or having to do things that you could have avoided and saved and put that money somewhere maybe a little bit more fun than getting your car fixed. But thank you guys for hanging out. We're right at 30 minutes. Let me know. Appreciate what you guys did in the comments, and we'll see you guys next week, if not sooner.